Everybody, we all right?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Sitting there at the back.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't got it.
Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the planning committee meeting being held at 6 p.m. on the 21st of April 2022. Just as a reminder, the meeting is being audio recorded, and a copy of that audio recording will be available on the council's site within 5 working days of this meeting. Just moving on, this is obviously the last meeting of the planning committee this year. And obviously we've got the elections coming up in a couple of weeks. So the next meeting that we'll have will be, I understand, on the 9th of June. And obviously the new councillors, if there are new, will be we'll have training prior to that date. Just looking around the room, councillors Howden, councillors Lydia, I understand you gentlemen are up for election. So it's the best of luck to both of you in your respective elections. And Councillor Fletcher, I understand this would be potentially it will be your last planning committee meeting. You've been with us for many years now, and you was vice chair also, and you have chaired in the past. So thank you for your time on the committee over the last few years.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best for the future. Who knows? Maybe you'll in retirement you might decide to come back. So who knows? Maybe we'll see you again in the future. But thank you for your support as well. So with that, we'll move on. Apologies for absence. Ken, do you have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Churchman and I believe Councillor Burnham sent apologies as well, and Steve Taylor, and with Councillor Little substituting for Councillor Churchman.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. I think everyone sees accounted for. There are no items of urgent business, so we'll move on to declarations of interest. I'm only after declarations of interest at this stage. Does anyone have any hands raised? No? Okay. No declarations of interest. Right, declarations of receipt of any correspondence. Now, there's been a few emails floating around. I've had an email from Billy Taylor in relation to item 10, which is the solar farm, and that's he's representing the solar farm, obviously promoting the benefits, and I think that was sent to most members. And I also received emails from, I believe it's the ward councillors in Ockenden, and I understand all 3 of them are generally quite supportive of the solar farm. I have received correspondence from a councillor Churchman outlining a few concerns in relation to item 7, which is the secondary school in Averley, and also received one from councillors David and Day in that there was a few concerns and made reference to a site visit being recommended. So we'll see what happens when we get to that item. I also received an email from Jessica Van and Tracy Needham in relation to the Averley Secondary School, and they were in relation to objections. So I'm not sure if you've all received those, but has anyone else received any correspondence?
Same from the chair.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Any additional councillors, Ginger Polly?
In the same vein, but a couple more, I think, Sister Claire, but yeah, their emails and more. Anything that was feeling like it. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I forgot that. Thank you, Chair. I did email Kenner as well, and we've had a late email coming. I've just checked my phone, and there seems to be the public are saying that they're not welcome at this meeting. So I don't know where that miscommunication is. So Kenner was quite open with me that the public were quite welcome to apply to come this evening. So I don't know where the misinformation is coming from, but that was content within a couple of the emails regarding the Love Lane application, not on any others.
Right, and thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm not aware of that, but yep, certainly can. We'll look into that. Thank you. All right then. So I think that's everything covered in terms of receipt correspondence. Planning appeals. Planning pages 5 to 14. Lee, do you have any comments or any questions or comments for Lee? Councillors Howden, then Councillor Polly.
Thank you, Chair. The amount of appeals that have been allowed against us now 47%. this is, I've only been on this committee for a year, but it naturally worries me that we're almost at the point where we lose more appeals than we actually win. Where do we stack up compared to other similar authorities in this regard? Because that generally sounds like a very concerning number. And do we know what the split is between, is this members' decision being overturned, or is this delegated decision being overturned in the main? Do we know what the source of the problem is?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I obviously wouldn't have the information available right now, but certainly something which we can look at. And it's essentially end of year now. So what we would look to do is do a bit of a deep dive on the appeal decisions that have been received and look for trends within those decisions. And as you say, a very good idea to look to other authorities, local authorities, to see how those appeal rates compare. And obviously that's split as well. So Chair's more than happy to take that away and present that back to members.
Could we actually perhaps have a formal report when we actually have our first meeting, when a committee has the first meeting of the new municipal year? Is there also a way to look at, because obviously this is what you published to us, which I think you've always published. We also have a look at the amount of applications that come in that are just frozen because we haven't been able to turn around the reports. Because obviously this only gives us the snapshot of pretty much the end of the process as far as we're concerned, but not in terms of how many applications we've been stuck with 10, 20, 30, 40 days.
Again, for you, Chair. So what we're talking about is the applications that are pending on hand.
Yeah.
Is that one? Okay. Well, what we will look to do is in the first meeting of the next municipal year, we'd present a performance report which looks back at the year previous. So more than happy for us to dive into some of this and present that next meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Polly.
Thank you, Chair. I think we have identified that some of these figures can be swift a little bit. We had one appeal that was allowed, so it makes 100% against us. So there are sort of trends that sometimes can affect figures. So it is obviously and has been for some time quite on the radar with developers and that. And I've just in that report, if we could look at percentage of applications received and or rather percentage of decisions that are then appealed, because I think we have a higher number than quite a few authorities. So although I mean in March we only had 6 appeals, but for the amount of decision lists that I see come through on a weekly basis, I would say percentage to the workload that we actually our output from our planning department, which is quite heavy. I think we need to look at that in proportion to the amount of work that these guys and girls get through, which is quite extensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And no, you're absolutely right. So at the end of the year, 36 appeals. There's been a lot of planning decisions that have been issued that obviously haven't gone through this. So we'll certainly look to put that in context in the next report.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Little.
Yeah, it seems to me that I was having a look back at this regarding the inspector that's rejected what was said and gone with the people that's appealed it. It's because he's used some leniency, and where we've been perhaps objecting to a porch or a window or something, or changing a street thing rather than big applications, these ones have been officer based. When I've gone back for about 6 months, it seems to be they're looking at it with more leniency, and I think for officers perhaps they ought to begin looking at that on those decisions that they make, and to have some type of plan on the way forward, because for us to go on their ways for theirs is, you know, ridiculous, really.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. So no further hands raised. That then takes us on to the rest of the items on the agenda. Now, item 9, Cedarwood Court and Elmwood Court. That was at the request of the developer and the council. That was deferred to a later date. So we hear that again at a later date. That leaves us with 3 items on the agenda, items 7, 8 and 10. And we'll start in order. So that's the first item on the agenda is item 7, 22/0077, Shire Deputy Harrier Primary School, found on pages 15 to 50. And Lucy, if you'd be so kind as to present the report on this primary school. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for construction of a new 2-form entry primary school and nursery with outdoor sports areas, access, parking, landscaping and drainage. By way of an update, since the report has been published, there have been 8 additional comments of objection received. The additional matters raised within these objections are regarding a possible urban extension and why the existing primary schools in Avely can't be extended rather than the new school. So, and there's also been a comment of support received from the Council's Education Department. Matter of importation of materials to level the site were initially not addressed within the application. These have now been addressed, so since the report's been published, and subject to an additional condition to ensure that imported materials are clean and the number of HGV movements in the 30-day importation period. So they'll be conditioned. Okay. Oh. So this is the site location plan. The application site is located to the south of Avely and north of the A13. The site is accessed from Love Lane, which is to the northeast and is a residential street. There is currently a right of way through the application site, and either side of the public right of way, the land agricultural uses. The land is classified within classification agricultural land classification 1, which is excellent quality. Residential properties are situated to the north and northeast of the site, whilst Tubby's Farm, the east, is utilised for equestrian activities. The site is located within Greenbelt. The site is within flood zone 1, but it's subject to small isolated pockets of surface water flooding in the northern, central and western portion of the site. So this is an aerial photo and you can see the site within the centre of the slide. Okay, this shows the proposed layout. So the new school building is within the northeastern corner of the site. School building will be 2 stories and create 2,400 square metres of floor space. The school would also offer a number of external play areas for students with hard surface yoga courts located just west of the school building. The playing fields will be located to the south of the school building in the central and eastern portions of the site. There would be a habitat area provided to the south and west of the yoga courts. So yeah, as I said before, public right of way, it's number 145, currently runs through the centre of the site. To enable the construction of the school, this would need to be diverted around the site, and the Council and Public Right of Way team have raised no objections to that proposal. Okay, so this is proposed elevations. In terms of the external appearance, the ground floor would be clad in a mixture of buff and Staffordshire blue brick. The first floor to the roof would be clad in a mixture of vertical timber cladding, and the hall and the nursery would have red cladding to help create contrasting features linking the school's branding to the design. The council's urban design officer does not support the design, but the applicant makes the point that modern methods of construction approach is fundamental to the Department for Education's programme for the delivery of new and replacement schools to a type programme. So the MMC framework and other school frameworks are the predominant method of securing new state schools across the country. And the design of these schools is in accordance with DFE's output specific, which have evolved from their research and experience in the past. So the applicant refers to design, timeframe and budget constraints associated with the delivery of new school buildings. although these constraints run contrary to the element of the MPPF in terms of design, policy of design and building use for. It's considered that components of the layout and appearance are disappointing. However, this is balanced with the pressing need for school places, a budget and time constraints. So it's concluded that the layout and design can be accepted in this context. There's one that's missed out.
That one?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, so this is just some visuals of the external of animations of the school. Okay, now onto some photos. So this photo shows a view from the entrance to the proposed entrance to the school site in Love Lane, so facing west on what is public footpath 145. So this shows the view from within the site facing northeast along Love Lane on footpath 145. So this shows, so the school site would be to the left of the photo, and that's a building called Clare Court to the right of the photo. And so this is within the site facing east towards Hall Lane on footpath 145. Okay, so the application summary, the site is located within Greenbelt and the proposals comprise inappropriate development. Consequently, there will be definitional harm to the Greenbelt as well as by loss of openness and harm to a number of characters which the Greenbelt serves. Substantial weight should be attached to this harm. There would also be harm resulting from the loss of grade 1 agricultural land. The applicant has set out factors which they consider constitute very special circumstances. So the first one is the need for school places, which is set out in the council's local place plan, and the sequential testing which has been done to a site in this area. So to deliver this need, this is considered the most ideal site. The elements of the layout and appearance of the development are disappointing, as I said before, and below the standards normally expected to achieve the placemaking agenda within Thurrock. However, as with recent new school proposals, the applicant is constrained by time, budget, and the need to provide these school places. It's concluded that all other matters of detail are acceptable subject to conditions.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure members have got plenty of questions. So just quickly, actually, before I go to questions, there was it wasn't just that as well, Luke. There was a comment also about energy efficiency being not quite up to the green standard. Is that correct? And I'm looking, I didn't see that there in your summary that, that too can be effectively glossed over. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies. Yeah, so our planning policies, so that should be outstanding, but all they can offer on this is very good. So yeah, they've put in kind of evidence that that's all that can be achieved.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure it will come up a little bit later on down the line. A couple of hands that were raised. First of all, Councillor Howard and then Councillor Little.
Chair, I think we've got an education officer who's on virtually, Sarah. I'm not quite understanding the comment about they can't fix some of these problems because they're so constrained by time. If I'm reading this correctly, the hand for that part of Aveley is about 480, and we're currently running at about 440. We're currently running at about 480. So we're already operating bulk classes in that area anyway, and it's actually going to shrink between 22 and 23 before increasing again in 24. So some of these issues that can't be ironed out because of time constraints, it doesn't seem that time is a tremendously urgent factor right now. So would Sarah just help us explain that, please? Sound that right?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you and good evening. We have been looking at our numbers and Councillor Howden and other members will know that we look at our pupil place planning all the time. So with our plan,
Sarah, we're
that's
just trying to sort out the sounds. We can hear you, but very lightly. If you could try and raise your voice as best you can, and we'll try and sort out the sound.
Thanks.
Councillor Mimk. We won't go.
Can you hear me now? I feel any better.
It's I'm not sure why it's not coming through.
Being done in person.
Yeah,
Okay, Sarah, for the moment, I'm going to have to ask you to shout, I'm afraid. If you could really raise your voice as best you can, and we'll see what we end up. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me now? Is that any better?
I mean, I can hear the person, but if you're saying,
It's audible, that's. No sound coming out of that then. What's all coming out of this one?
What's Cat's Piffle like then?
Yeah, no, I can hear it.
Actually, I think it's quite awful.
Yeah.
And there's two schools going through.
okay, bear with us for a second. If you hear me. So,
Also, as this is been this be part of the
right, actually, sorry. Okay, Sarah, can you try again for us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Slightly better.
Slightly. I am talking very loudly. Is that better?
Yeah, slightly better, please.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we look at our pupil place plan, as I said, and we forecast the pupil numbers on an annual basis. But what we also look at is what comes in year. So when we forecast, we're looking at developments and we're looking at birth data. So that's live birth data. And that's how we do our forecasting. But of course, that doesn't always account for all the in-year applications that we get. And we get a considerable amount of applications coming through. And when we look at Aveley and Kennington's, those schools are filling pretty quickly with not enough spaces as each year goes on. Does that answer your question?
Some of the issues that are addressed right now, up the year.
Sorry, councillor, I can't hear you.
That's not my problem.
reminded me, so central government is legislation year, and basically it's only got 10 weeks, well, 13 weeks. Still any big infrastructure. So we're very much kind of, the urgency is, I wouldn't say out of our hands, but it is.
The application come in.
So because it had to come
I've gone over the 10 weeks, but they could appear.
Okay, the application was lodged on the 18th of January.
Yeah.
So it's taken awfully to actually get to committee.
First, realistically.
Realistically, with all the matters that need to be addressed, this was the first committee that it could get to.
I think the point I've got on my.
But if you use that one over there, please.
So I think that one. Yeah, I think the point Lucy's making is for all planning applications where as a planning authority told to issue a decision within certain timeframes, so it's either 8 weeks, 13 weeks or 16 weeks. July, I think it was last year, the government said for public infrastructure, schools, hospitals, prisons, 10 weeks. So we can't comment on the timing of when the application came in because we can't control that. But the school, the DFE, the applicant obviously considered that they needed a decision at a certain period of time. So hence they put in the application and the clock was ticking. And actually their covering letter made it very, very clear they expected us to issue a decision within 10 weeks. There's committee cycles, obviously, we're always working 3 weeks ahead. And there were discussions with the highways officer to resolve some of the highways issues. So we've got it here as quick as we can. But as we understand it, there's pressing need for school places. And I think that's what you heard from the council's education officer, and it being public service infrastructure, as it's now called. Yeah. Basically, time to get our skates on as a planning authority.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is we're being told that we need to move quickly on this application because of the school place issue in that area. And in that area at the moment, we're talking between now and 2024, we're talking about a few dozen places. We're not talking about a few hundred. So that's the point I'm making in terms of the urgency that is being applied to us at the moment. This is not a school planning area where we've got hundreds, too few school places. It's a few dozen. So I'm just not clear on the sense of urgency when there are other issues in this application that seemingly need to be addressed. It's a planning area with 840, with a plan of 840, with maximum by 2025 for a demand of 928. That's 88 places as a deficit. That's not tremendous in the whole realms of things. That doesn't seem like something that would require us to move so incredibly quickly. We should skirt over some of the other issues.
Without sort of treading on Lucy's toes, but it's time and budget pressures, Chair, which have been quoted to us, and the experience of other schools in the borough recently, Thames Park, Dorset Heath to a degree, and probably Purfleet, the Harrods Academy at Purfleet, which was probably 2 or 3 years ago now. It's budget as well as time frame. I mean, you've heard from the late written response we had from the education department was support for the scheme. So you just have to take that at face value. They support the scheme. What Lucy referred to and what we've set out in the report in terms of design, Brian, use of agricultural land, which is grade 1, they're factors which don't weigh in favour of the scheme, and certainly the design. We did pre-act this one last year, recollection, when we raised it as an issue, but we do get an argument put back to us, which is schools operate on a tight budget. There's a given figure build cost per square metre. That's what we're up against. So we've said it's disappointing, and yeah, we think it is disappointing for a public building which is going to be there for a number of decades. Could do better, but that's what we're up against. And the balance is you've got an NPPF which says, in terms of economic and social sustainable development, providing school places is important. You've got a planning for schools ministerial statement from 2011. Admittedly, it's a few years old, but it's still valid, saying it's almost a presumption in favour, of new school development. So you've got to weigh, as ever, you've got to balance the scales and come up with a balanced and informed decision.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I'm not arguing against new school development anywhere. I think my record shows I'm overwhelmingly in favour of new school development everywhere. But yeah, in terms of the just again the time that we have to move really quickly on this kind of regardless of some of the problems because of the time and build cost. I'm relatively sure if this is the Reach 2 preschool, this bid was actually won when I was still cabinet member for education. And I've not been the cabinet member for 3 years now. And I think the bid was won in my third or fourth year. So it was approved as a free school almost 4 years ago. So, almost half a decade has passed. So I'm not clear why we suddenly need to go an absolute sprint when there are clearly a couple of concerns about the design of the scheme when it has been knocking around for coming on close to half a decade. I would
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Chair, see if we can have a second crack at it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lissou, you had your hand raised?
No, yes, Chair, because like Councillor Howden, I'm concerned with how quickly you're putting this through. Don't even really like the design, and it's going to be a public building. And if you're saying that, obviously, the government is saying if it's a school or a hospital or prison, that has to be go before planning quicker in a set amount of time. I don't think we've planned any building blocks. It should have been moved further up the planning agenda, surely. But I am disappointed that we haven't got an educational person. There was a question I wanted to ask about education, and I found quite confusing. On page 19, we've got travel plan, no response received. And then on page 43, it says should be done before agreed with local planning application, planning authority. Now, I would have thought they would have had lots of travel plans and know what happens with the movement of the travel plans in that particular area. And, it just seems ridiculous. 1 minute you're saying we've got to have it before we pass it, and then other things, we haven't even got the travel plan. And the travel plans must be fit for purpose. Everyone's moaning about all the traffic.
Okay, Julian, did you want to come in there? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As with all schools, we do ask them if they would kindly submit a travel plan in advance, but we don't hold that as a travel plan. We use the Mochi Stars system travel plans. So a condition will be set for this school that they will follow the Mochi Star going from bronze to start with to gold. So we will be following them once they come in, and they will have to follow the Mochi Stars system of travel plans that all schools should be following. That we should be, but it's difficult. This is why you'll see when even a school will come in and they'll put like a new hallway on the front. If they're not running their school travel plan, I will ask the road safety officer and ask her whether they're actually doing their Mochi Stars. If they're not, then I will condition that even on something like a hallway. So one way or another, we will get them in the end. But this is a new school, and this will be part of their conditions that they will follow the Mochi Stars.
Yeah, just to help. On page 16 of the agenda, you'll see the documents which were submitted to support the application. So there was an outline travel plan with documents called framework travel plan as well. The broad bones, page 16. So we had the broad bones of a travel plan submitted. Yes, unfortunately we didn't get travel plan comments, but on page 43 of the agenda, condition number 7, you've got the backup or prior to first operation. If you were to approve agree the recommendation, then prior to the school actually first operating, a full travel plan would need to be submitted and agreed and then implemented through the lifetime of the development.
Yeah, I read that.
And you might please, Councillor.
I read that it's prior to the first. All buildings, it hereby permitted. Like, we won't be building them until we've got to know about the travel plan. I was reading. But hey ho, I'm just concerned about it. about the speed this is going through, because basically we're going to be tonight agreeing something that is already said doesn't really meet the standards of what we expect public buildings to be in Thurrock. And, you know, Thurrock's a really lovely place to be in and it's great. Don't let's go spoil it by putting substandard school.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure. We can cover those on the debate stage. Councillor Piccolo and Councillor Howard.
Yeah, that's one of the options to clarify this. Are we being asked to lower our standards by central government, or just make the decision in time? There's two different things here. We either are being asked to lower our standards, which we've done to make it fit in time, or we're being asked to make a decision in the correct time frame. We can make a decision in the correct time frame. It may not be the decision that you're looking for, but you know what's the balance?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in my kind of personal opinion, the two, it's a kind of, if you're trying to speed something through, then you lose quality. That is, so the council is kind of forced into this position, so it's not ideal, but we just put forward.
Yeah, just the way we set out in the report, and we've set out in the report for Thames Park, and we've certainly set out in the report for probably purpley the Harris. Get my Harry and Harris confused. We're setting that in the report that you've got national policy, MPPF, achieving well-designed places, and that now has reference to building beautiful buildings. You know, that's the first time that's been there. So it's almost as if the emphasis on design keeps on ratcheting up and up and up. But there's a tension between trying to do real positive placemaking, that's a word we've used in the agenda, and upping the standard, and perhaps being faced with development where it's constrained by budget and constrained by time. There's yes, there is a tension there. And the council's urban design officer sought some improvements. Let's put it that way. Sought some improvements to the building, and we would probably agree with that. But again, you've got to take the balance. It's a tough balance you've got to take there. About we're told there's a need. We're told to do it quickly. We're told there's almost a presumption in favour. I mean, that's not going to override Greenbelt, by the way. So we have to mention it's a Greenbelt site. That wouldn't override that, but there's a strong policy presumption in favour of providing new school places. That's all in the mix. And I'm afraid I'm looking across at you and you've got to weigh all that up and get a decision at the end of it. But yes, there's a tension between achieving well-designed places and schools delivered perhaps on a budget. I'm old enough to remember Building Schools for the Future programme 20 plus years ago, and schools I dealt with at London Boroughs, they won architectural awards.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Howard and Councillor Fletcher.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm still hoping that bosses on the screen can answer the question about the sustainability. They're always told in planning we have to consider the sustainability of a development. Yep. Is opening a school with a maximum capacity of 420 in a planning area that's only got 88 a deficit of 88 places by the midpoint of this decade, is that definitely a sustainable development? Or we can have a school that struggles to become financially stable?
Would you like me to respond to that, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, as you know, when we in the time when the school was approved, you're probably right, 4 or 5 years ago. In that time, we've had to expand another primary school by a form of entry. We've had to put bulge classes into that planning area. This new school will, although it's a 2-form entry, which is what we're looking for approval for and funded and delivered by the Department for Education, what we will do is work with them to open it as a one form initially, because obviously we get lots of late applications coming in through mid-year. And so, you know, our view is that it will be sustainable. What we wouldn't do is open it as a 2-form entry initially, because, you know, what we would need is a 1 form with a view to it growing to a 2 form.
But for this academic year, we've got about 50 or so places that we've had to create in Aveley already to cater. So are you saying then that if this school is approved, when it opens, you're then going to reduce down the size of the 2 existing schools to release those 50 pupils and move them to a new school? Because the current deficit has already been addressed in that area to make sure children have got a school place. So the overpad are not suddenly going to rock up at a brand new school, are they?
What we've got when we look at our numbers, councillor, is for 2023, in particular, 46 space deficit across reception, but 77 across the whole school. So although we may open a reception class, we may also need to open other year groups because of the deficit across the whole school for Aveley and Kennington's, and that's without in-year applications coming in. And again, if I look at 24-25, we've got deficit places in reception, and again across the whole school for both of those schools, quite a considerable number. And we're also watching what's happening and keeping an eye on the rest of the planning area, because as there are no other spaces and all those spaces reduce, that then means we are transporting or looking at offering places into a different planning area for those families.
Being clear, we've got a deficit already in that area, so we've expanded to 2
Yes.
schools. New school
Yes.
will open, but that total deficit will not go to the new school because those pupils wouldn't expect to leave their current schools and go to the new schools. So we're not trying to cater for that full figure that you just said, 77. We'll be catering for a fraction of that. And that's what I'm saying. Is this a sustainable development when you consider that we're only catering for a fraction of that deficit, because a huge amount of that deficit has already been addressed at the existing Aveley school and the existing Kennington school?
That's taking into consideration the places that are available in the forecasted data at Aveley and Kennington's. That is what our deficit will be already, with those schools being full, and looking at what our current numbers on roll are. When we write our pupil place plan and we forecast our data, that's done back in and published a year in advance. It's done on an annual basis. So actually what happens is each month we look at the data, and as we receive new applications, we're constantly looking at that pupil data all the time. So the plan is great when it's written, and it gives us an idea about live births, what's happened in terms of numbers of children that are born in those particular planning areas. But what it doesn't give is what happens in year. And so that's some of the consideration.
How many pupils do we think will be in it?
Sorry, councillor.
So from the moment the school opens its doors on the 1st of September in a given year, how many pupils do we think there will be in Aveley needing that school?
What we have forecast is we have for reception. So if I talk about again 2023, for example, in the reception we have got 40. We are short by 46 spaces. That's more than 1 form entry. That's more than a class of 30. So that means that we wouldn't have those spaces in Kennington's or Aveley, and then we would have to then offer spaces elsewhere within Thurrock that have got places available in schools.
So 47 in the first year.
46 in reception in 2023, but across all of the year groups in those 2 schools, we are short by 77 places, which means that if we then get those applications, that's what we're forecasting, we're going to have as pupils over the pan. We then have to find school places elsewhere in the planning area or the next planning area for those students.
Yes, I'm struggling to see how that 47 makes it viable, certainly for years 1, 2 and 3. But also that also presupposes that the new school is actually going to be built on time. Yeah, with the best will in the world, I spent 4 years trying to get schools built on time, and I don't think I was ever particularly successful at it. So when you don't get a school built on time, you expand existing schools. So if the school isn't built and open for when we want it to be, and therefore we have to expand existing schools to get over that hump, then that means the viability of the new school is threatened even further.
Well, we wouldn't expand other schools. We would put bulge classes in. Generally, for an expansion, we would be looking at a school at least having 2 or more bulge classes in their school.
Once bulge classes in there, people stay in that school.
They do until they finish. They do until they finish year 6. But given that, you know, since the free school was approved, and you know, I'd like to remind members that this free school is funded and delivered by the Department for Education. Any bulge classes or expansions are funded by the local authority. So in that last 4 years, we have, as I said, already expanded Benyon Primary. We've already put bulge classes in. If we continue to keep having to do that each year without, you know, infrastructure longer term, that's not sustainable either. At some point, we won't be able to keep expanding the stock, you know, the current schools that we do have.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. Councillor Fletcher, did you have any hand raised?
Thank you, Chair. Getting back to the school itself, I don't want to put words into anybody's mouth, but in here, presentation, I do get the impression that not entirely happy with it, that there is this question. Yeah, but accepted because of time, because of budget, etc. If we take time out of the question, the details, you know, we've already been having to deal with the of classes. If we took time out of the equation, would you have been minded to approve? If time weren't a factor, is this proposal that you would have considered acceptable?
Okay, yeah, so when you say time, it's two things.
Yeah,
It's
take
building
away the-
and- yeah.
I mean, as Matt has already pointed out, yes, this has tended to come up with a number of the school proposals that we've heard in the last 12 months. So let's park that for a minute, and also, as Councillor Alden said, however urgent the need might be, it takes time to build these. So park the time issue. As a school, as a building which is going to be in place for the next 20, 30, 40 years, would you have been minded to approve this proposal if you weren't being told we haven't really got time to deal with these issues?
Yeah, so with planning applications when we have got the time, we would always look to negotiate, especially on urban design issues. So yeah, unfortunately, we haven't got that time.
That's what I'm trying to sort of yeah, that's useful, thanks, because it sounds like you're basically not being given that scope for negotiation because somebody's going, got to be done. Yeah, it just worries me that might be leaving you short of where you'd want to be.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, on the design point, I think that comes back to budget, but on some of the other points, Brianne, our policy, your own policy says that from 2019, Brianne outstanding, which we do achieve. We achieve it on London Gateway, for example. There is a get out. The policy says if an applicant can't achieve it, then they put in viability, justify it. We haven't had that. So with time, we have resolved that. And there could be a very good reason why they can't do it. Conceivably. Similarly, agricultural land classification, it's down as being grade 1 on the DEFRA maps, albeit they're at a very large scale. So it's not highly accurate on field by field, but on a prima facie level, it's grade 1. What the policy says, well, what we'd normally expect, and we had it a live application fairly recently, is The applicant has basically told the case officer, we don't think it's grade 1. Well, if we had time, we'd say evidence it. Instruct a consultant to do a detailed site survey to look at soil structure, drainage, etc. And it could be the case it's not grade 1. But with time, we would do that as well. So time would perhaps look to address some of the issues. I'm not entirely sure about design though, because that's very much budget driven.
Thanks, Matt, but yeah, I suppose that is the sort of the crux of my concern. Are your hands being tied here? Sounds like, given the time, there are things you would want to pursue to get right. And you're effectively being told, you haven't got time to do that, take it or leave it.
By central government, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Were there any further hands raised? Councillor Polly?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Fletcher's question there. That I'm now confused, because if it was just time constraint and we wasn't satisfied with the design and all the other issues, we could have made the decision of refusal. So I'm not understanding why the 10-week means that we must give it a permission. That's not what the 10-week is about. It's a decision in 10 weeks, isn't it? And we're already past that anyway. We're already over our time. So I'm not quite. If we was 8 weeks and we only had 2 weeks to make a decision, then I could see why it was a factor. But we're already over our 10-week deadline, and as I say, I'm not understanding, unless I've misunderstood totally, why a 10-week deadline means that we must approve it. I've never read anything in legislation that says it has to be approved.
Yeah, I think the evidence has been put forward that we need this school in this specific area. And if we refuse the application and it was appealed, I think the council would be open to kind of losing the appeal, but also probably a costs decision. And yeah, you go, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, the 10-week determination period, all it means, it's a target, because, you know, if every planning application has a target, and we're judged on hitting targets like everything else in life. So it's a target, and it doesn't mean we have to approve, obviously. It just means a decision. But I think it's more about the government telling local planning authorities, as of last summer, that certain types of public service infrastructure are important. Schools are important, healthcare is important. Now, whether or not this is to do with COVID, you know, getting the economy kick-started, whatever, I'm not a politician, I can't tell. But they changed the time frame to say that ordinarily this would have been a 13-week determination. Suddenly it's overnight, it's 10. The applicant did remind Lucy's case officer in their covering letter, you know, refer you to the legislation last year, this is the 10-weeker. And as I understand it, they wanted it reported as early as possible. So going back to the point Councillor Fletcher made, yeah, we've been pushed to take a decision here, but if you still think there are issues to be resolved, the decision making, you know, we're making a recommendation on balance, and there's pros and cons like everything.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
No, it's okay.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Watson, then we'll have a speaker statement, and then we'll head to debate. Councillor Watson.
Right, I'll make this really quick. Are you trying to say that basically we've got our backs towards the wall here? And that the DFES was going to come in anyway, even if we say no?
Yeah, if a decision isn't issued on any planning application within the statutory time period, the applicant has a right of appeal. So, and I don't imagine they would do that, because most people want to work with local planning authority, but ultimately, as soon as the 10 weeks is up, they they could appeal a non-determination. And as it's a school, I'd suggest that if it went to the planning inspectorate, they'd fast track it. In the same way they fast track residential, because housing delivery is important. So the 10-week is a target. What's the worst that could happen? An applicant can appeal, lack of decision. It's taken out of our hands.
I get that, but it just really sounds like now, from my point of view, that we are in that position where, like, 10 weeks, it's a school, there is a time factor that we need to do, where it's not up to standard that we would want. Councillor Howard's completely right in the fact that it sounds unsustainable at the moment, but yeah, we've got that, make that decision now, otherwise it goes to an appeal.
Chair, I'm going to ask Lucy, because as I understand it, they want to be operational next intake 2023.
We might need to double check with Sarah on this, because in the planning statement, it said September 23, but the agent said to me September 24. So Sarah, can you confirm?
My understanding is 2024.
2024, yeah.
Yes.
2024. Okay, right. Well, let's move on to sorry, Councillor Polly, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm struggling with the fact that we've had that effectively the school was discussed 4 or 5 years ago. The legislation on the determination changed in July last year. We have quite to the best of my knowledge, quite an approachable planning department that preload planning applications and are open to dialogue and concern. So I'm not quite sure how much sort of dialogue there was, because rather than just present it in January, with the timescales that have gone before that, I mean, was the applicant actually in dialogue with the authority before? Did we know that when the application was going to be submitted, there was still these unresolved items?
Yeah, the applicant had put in 2 pre-application inquiries.
Yeah.
So the first one, so yeah, 2 pre-application inquiries, and the second one was just based on design. So we have, believe it or not, come actually quite a long way with the application. Yeah. So they did. I was being told that the application was coming in, and then nothing happened. Absolutely no idea why that is. I assume it's something to do with DFE, and Sarah might or might not know on that. So we did know about it quite a long time in advance, but when it actually came, I think they at the blue emailed and said, "Oh, it's coming in next week." So yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right then. So that's questions dealt with for the moment. So we'll move on to speaker statements. Now we do have a statement of support from Michelle Davies as the agent. If we join us online, I understand, Michelle, if you could, obviously you have your statements in front of you, but if you could speak as loudly and as clearly as possible, and you have 3 minutes in which to present your case. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to present remotely. It's extremely helpful. The office has set out in her report that national policy directs that great weight has to be afforded to the need to create school places. And in this area, the need for school places is clear. It's set out at paragraph 635 of Lucy's report. Both primary schools that serve the area are already over capacity as of September 21, and this will be even worse by 2025. And obviously members have just debated that. As part of the application submission, we assessed 16 other sites within the locality to see if they could accommodate a school of the required size with sufficient outdoor space and sports pitches, as well as car parking. all of the sites, some of which were other existing schools, were either unsuitable or unavailable. It is acknowledged that this is a greenbelt site, but by virtue of the two factors above, i.e. the critical need and the lack of any other suitable or available sites, it is agreed by officers that very special circumstances exist to make what would otherwise be an inappropriate development in greenbelt acceptable. And this policy test has been similarly met by other schools on greenbelt around the country. So the principle is acceptable. Noting the comments on design, the school building is located as close to the urban edge as possible to minimise impact on the green belt, and uses timber cladding and buff and blue brick to blend into the landscape. And we do consider it to be a high quality design. As explained by officers, there are constraints on funding which have to be worked with. And I would reiterate what Lucy has just said about how we did work with the council at pre-application stage. The movement of the building to the urban edge was one of the outcomes of that dialogue, and that proximity to the urban edge will facilitate its role as a community facility, which will be served by secured by community use agreement. On sustainability, BREEAM Very Good will be achieved, and this is still a really high standard of sustainable design. I'd just like to make clear as well that the issue with achieving BREEAM Outstanding is also one that's budgetary, and not something that's just arisen as a result of time constraints. We're aware of traffic issues that can arise with schools, and we've also worked really hard with the Highway Authority on this aspect. The proposal is policy compliant in terms of the number of car and cycle spaces it's providing. And as well as these, the scheme provides 15 drop-off and pick-up spaces for parents. And the operation of those spaces will be managed in the car park management plan in conjunction with the travel plan. And the latter document, which has also been talked about, will contain measures to encourage pupils, visitors and staff to use sustainable methods of transport. Ultimately, this is a local school for local children, and walking to school will be encouraged. In conclusion, this development will meet an urgent need for school places in the locality, and the public benefits of this scheme clearly outweigh any harm to Greenbelt, and we welcome the officer's recommendation of approval today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that statement, Michelle. Okay, so there's no further statements on this one here this evening. Based on that statement, were there any further questions? Then we'll get to debate. No, okay, all right then. So heading to debate, Councillor Fletcher. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. I think as far as the question of harm and benefits outweighing harm, I agree both with the fact that it, by definition, is harm. I also feel that the reasons given for consideration, the benefits given for consideration, do appear to me to outweigh the harm. So, on that grounds, I can't see a problem. Where I do see a problem is that I do get the feeling, and I'm sure it'll be denied, but I do get the feeling there is a certain amount of railroading going on. I feel that officers have been railroaded. We are being railroaded. It appears clear to me that this is, were we not being told that there's no time, there's an urgent need, we would be asking for more time to consider this further and to resolve the outstanding issues. As far as there being an urgent need, even assuming that the figures, I was just about following the debate between the officer and Councillor Holden, that I kind of got the impression that 77 over 3 minus 4, take away the number you first thought of, probably arrives at a figure somewhere still around 77. It still doesn't equate to an entire school's worth. This doesn't feel like a good enough reason to railroad through a building about which you guys have issues, and I think we have issues. And I certainly won't be, I'm certainly not minded to refuse the application, but I am very strongly minded to ask for a deferral so that the planning team can resolve those issues that have clearly been concerning them.
Thank you,
Okay.
Councillor Fletcher. Sorry, Chair, can I just raise a point? Sarah's just messaged me regarding the opening date of the school. So she said it was originally 2024, but given the deficit in the two schools, DfE have advised opening date of September 23. But that wouldn't be the whole school. That would be kind of, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lucy, for that clarification. Right, moving on to councillors Howden, then Polly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Fletcher. I would support it deferment. I'm not willing to refuse it because school growth is always welcome and we do need to create new schools, but there are issues with the design standard here. And I do have concerns with viability. I mean, bring it forward to 2023. I'm struggling to wrap my head around some of the viability issues there. I think there needs to be more in-depth conversations that just aren't adequately presented here with Kenningtons and Aveley. I think there needs to be more information regarding the emerging local plan, because the reality is that once you build a school, you're not going to relocate it. We're approaching, a maturity in the current stage we are in terms of the local plan. This may not be the most opportune position for a school when you take in the wider context. And for me, this is a very different kettle of fish from when we put forward, was it Heath Academy or Thameside, because we knew what the growth was there. We knew what the acute need was there. The need in this part of the world does not feel to me to be urgent today. It may well be urgent tomorrow, but not today. And with the wider context of the emerging local plan, we need to make sure we get it right, because we can't then suddenly magic up a brand new school when we realise that the sustainability argument is wrong. So I think I'll support Councillor Fletcher in as deferment so officers can get further conversations on those three issues.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to councillors Polly, then Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. I'm erring on the same side as Councillor Holden and Councillor Fletcher here. There's too many unanswered questions. Love Lane, 40 years ago, had an educational facility in Love Lane that I attended as an outreach college from the one in Kenya right there. So and that's gone over to housing, and here we are back asking for educational education. So that's life going full circle. However, we've recently had an issue with a school that had a mugger with community issues and how that becomes a good neighbour. There's some areas around that I'd like to explore about where that mugger sits with that housing estate that's there and how that would work. We've got Ship Lane, which we know is a traffic nightmare that feeds onto the M25, the dark kind of roundabout there. Hall Lane and Love Lane is fed by Ship Lane. Without the travel plan and that, I've got real concerns. I understand that we can apply standards, but this, I think Aveley is quite unique in the siting of this school as well, that to sort of make assumptions that the travel plan that is applied, for example, in the primary school in the high road in Aveley is the same as here. I'm not comfortable with. And finally, just because the applicant is using the 10-week changing legislation of July last year as a bit of a stick, they didn't apply urgency in July last year when the legislation was changed. So I'm not quite sure why it's such a major consideration for us as a committee now. So I'm minded to support the other councillors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tickler.
Yeah, just to, it is the cost of agricultural land and greenbelt land. So it's even more important, I think, that we get a good quality development and not something that's substandard. If we're giving up greenbelt or agricultural land, we're not going to get back. And to lower our standards when we're giving up something that under any other circumstance, we would treat with more importance, I think is wrong. And also, another thing, I'm a bit concerned, as we all know what it's like to drop off and pick up time at school, they're supplying 15 pickup points to a school that's going to have 400 plus pupils on it. You know, so I mean, I'm coming out to, but I say that's my concern, that there's only 15 off-road pickup and drop-off points. A school of 400. That everybody knows. Everybody's got a school in their ward, probably, or their area, but there's probably cars parking in the road to pick up and drop off on. So that's the two things that I'm mainly concerned about. Yeah, so I think if we can go to the development and get to improve things, so that means deferring it. So, but if we're not happy to defer it, I don't think it meets the standards that needs to pass the Greenbelt test. So I'd be just as much in favour of refusing the application. They've left it to the last minute, for example. Thank you, Jim. That's right. I can't speak.
Okay, thank you. Julia, very briefly, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that the new parking standards that have been approved by members don't include the pick up and drop facilities for new schools. So what they provide is actually additional, which officers asked for those additional spaces. Originally, when the first application came in, it had none at all. So we've actually asked as part of the application for those to be included. So it's a bit of a plus rather than a negative.
Yeah, I think obviously wherever you put a school, you're going to have issues, but that is good to see, Julian, that you've taken note of what we said in the past. So, yeah, no, thank you for putting that in. Councillor Piccolo, very briefly.
Yeah, just brief. Is that regardless of the size of the school, 15? So if it's got 50 pupils, it needs 15. If it's got 1,500, it needs 15.
There is no requirement for pick up and drop off facilities. What we've said is within the size of the space that they were originally asked, I think there were about 3 or 4 originally. So we asked them to really look at the whole of the parking and the pick up and drop off. So, and that will be as we looked at the Thames Park School, that will form part of a car park management scheme in that they will control the cars as they come in. Most schools you where don't have these pick up and drop offs, and it's not a requirement in the new parking standards.
Okay, thank you. And then Councillor Lydiard, and I assume we'll be heading to a vote.
Yeah, I just think that we're sort of having our arms twisted up our back on this particular one. Under normal circumstances, I think we would go for refusal, but because, you know, it is the DfE and we're being asked to approve it, and I'm not so happy. I think we should send a very strong message back that this is not what we want for the future.
Thank you. Councillor Howard. Yeah.
So I know we leapt out of question time, but if not, so could perhaps answer. The use of agricultural land, I can't remember, and I could very well be wrong. Is there some sort of equestrian use of that land at all?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure what the question means. So if it's agriculture, is it right to use it for?
No, sorry. What is there equestrian use of that land?
Yeah.
I seem to vaguely recall something. I'm sure there is. Yeah.
It's owned by all school.
Yeah, there was some sort of equestrian use, and I think we would have to re-provide facilities if they're destroyed through a planning application.
Well, if that is correct, what we'll do is, and it looks like there is appetite for referral, but yeah, like we can focus on that. Councillor Watson, do you have anything about this?
I think you're right, Councillor. But actually grazing that land as well as slow worms and that are protected species that you can't disturb or move. Yeah. So going forward though, in terms of all I just feel completely agree with my rather see what the local plan brings up than go and put another school in where it's not necessarily the right place to be. I think the turning because of the will only part. I don't like the idea of the actual school being not up to standard. And I remember building schools for the future, and they were very high. Academy. I'd like that more to be worked with. I don't like the idea that we don't decisions. Just feel that we're being told we have to do that. And in terms of that road, we all know and heard about Mayflower Road, Shepherd, how bad that school is from the house. And I think that would be very, very similar down Love Lane, which is even a narrower road than Mayflower. So I think that there'll be a load of traffic, and if you go down a street now in the mornings at the school then, it's chaos, absolutely chaos, and you're going to put it there. And I think that is really good for us to actually see a travel plan, even though it's not required yet, but it would be good if it could go forward. Look, I'm not going to say no on against education or schools or whatever, we build them. We need to build them in the right places. We need to build them with the right infrastructure that is our standard. Because we're on a budget constraint, that's not our problem. That's how I feel.
All right, then, thank you. Thank you everyone for your contributions there. Okay, so I think it's clear that there is an appetite there for an alternative recommendation. And that was proposed by yourself, Councillor Fletcher, and I believe that was seconded by Councillor Howden. So that's an alternative recommendation for a deferral. So what we're saying is, look, we appreciate we do need school places, but we are nervous that this might have come to us a little bit too quick. We're also nervous that the officers may, respectfully, and I'm not disagreeing with their recommendation, but they may be up against time constraints when it comes to making these decisions. So we'd like a little bit of work done there. Before I go any further, now Lee, you've been taking down comments. Do you have anything to add there to what's been said?
Thank you, Chair. So we're just taking down some comments as they've been raised. So sort of going backwards from their comments. So what I'm trying to do is just to really distill what the issues that could be picked up in via conditions or amended conditions, and what needs to be parked on the other side, which would lean towards the potential deferral. So matters of travel plan, there is obviously a condition which is set out in the report that would be an appropriate way to manage that particular issue. There's been a lot of debate around that. The condition could be tweaked to require the economic viability report up front to then inform the standard that would be required. Not ideal, but there could be a way to reword that for that particular report if he was minded to that condition. So if he was minded to make a decision this evening. Agricultural land, that's been addressed in the report as on balance there would be a loss of agricultural land, and that's been weighed in the balance in the Greenbelt decision making process. But I'm hearing what members are saying actually that you would like to see the assessment of that agricultural land before that, so you feel more comfortable in making that particular judgment. So that is something which we wouldn't be able to add any more detail to this evening, and we would need to request that from the applicant. In terms of design, certainly you could spend more time redesigning and working with the design team. The applicant would need to do that. It does come back down to budget, I guess, at the end of the day, and how far that budget will go in terms of improving the design further. But again, I'm hearing members saying actually that's an exercise worthwhile to go through. In terms of justification of pupil numbers and the sustainability of school, obviously you've heard from the Council's Education Officer on this. If members are still uncertain about that, again, that feels as a reason to defer. So there are elements there, Chair, if you were looking to defer, we're taking them down, we can certainly put them back to the applicant and work through that with them. But what I would say is that the recommendation that has been put forward and the report that's been put forward is still stand by that. It is the right recommendation that's been put forward based on the information that we know at this moment in time. It is a point in time recommendation, and the conditions have been used to try to address any loose ends with that. So, but with that, Chair, over to you.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, you mentioned about the equestrian there, yeah?
Oh, that was picked up on the last
picked up on the board. Okay, really, is everyone happy, yeah? And just one other one, I don't know if it's a bit bizarre, probably a silly question actually. Matt sort of brushed over it earlier on. In the borough, there wouldn't be a concern with Harry and Harris having similar school names because they're very similar, aren't they? Harry and Harris. I personally think that you might want to check that because I can see people turning up at the wrong school. I'm not saying the pupils are going to turn up, but if you're visiting the area and you're visiting Harry, you Google Harri, Harris will come up on your phone, so it might just be worth checking. I do think that those two names are similar, personally. But if you think that's bizarre and silly, don't worry about it. I just personally think you shouldn't have two similar named schools in the area. So maybe just check. Look, if it's important, it's called Harry, then by all means, just
Cross the bridge too.
okay, brilliant. All right, then, thank you. So with that, are we happy to move to the vote then? Yeah, we're brilliant. So there is an alternative recommendation, which is a deferral with the reasons set out there, recommended by Councillor Fletcher, seconded by Councillor Howland. All those in favour of the deferral, please raise your hands. Unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's unanimous across the committee. So that deferral has been approved. Thank you everyone for your contributions there. Thank you for those who have joined us via Zoom. And yeah, hopefully we come to a conclusion soon. All right then, so with that, we'll now move on. We have two remaining items on the agenda this evening. We'll move on to item 8. Also at Heath Academy, that's 22/00302/FUL. Also at Heath Academy, academy pages 51 to 84. Nadia, thank you. If you'd be so kind to present your report.
Many thanks, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me virtually as well as in the room. A few updates and a few matters of housekeeping briefly before I present the item. As a result of further comments received from Sport England relating to the applicant's submitted SEMP, the wording of the required SEMP under condition 9 has been changed to that of a pre-commencement condition. This will require the applicant to submit an updated SEMP prior to carrying out the development on site, which will reflect and pick up comments made by the RFU with Sport England, just to give the RFU that bit greater comfort that no part of the proposal in relation to the SEMP matters would impact upon operations of the rugby club. I should add that Sport England don't object at all to the proposals or the amended wording of condition 9, and it's entirely being carried out in agreement with Sport England, the RFU, the council and the applicant. In addition, a further condition, condition 10 regarding landscaping is going to be added. That was left off the report. That's my error and oversight. Further update in relation to the consultation for the application. The council, since publication of the agenda, the council has since received 8 further letters, all of support from residents in support of the application on the basis that the proposal would enable a full curriculum of learning to be offered at the new school for the new school year group and for the new incoming pupils that have been all offered places at the school. So on to the presentation. Slide 1. Thanks, Kenna. This slide. No, I'll take a breath. This slide shows the extent of the site. The redlined area defines the bulk of the area of the application site, comprising the main interim school site at the rugby club. The pink hatched area shows the extent of the proposed artificial cricket strip located on the site of the existing rather tired strip and between 2 of the existing rugby pitches, and the site lies entirely within the greenbelt. Slide 2 shows an aerial image of the interim school site at the rugby club. And members may recall the application for the permanent school on the site of the land located south of the rugby club and north of Stamford Road. Final details relating to this joint project between the DFE and the contractor for the new permanent school are being reviewed by the DFE, and it's anticipated that the decision notice will be issued very soon so that works can commence on site for the new school. This slide shows there we go. This slide shows an image of the extent of the wider rugby club site with outlined in blue. And the next slide shows the existing site layout with the main school buildings and hard playground area to the west of the site. And the narrow strip across the north of the site is the location of the proposed temporary classroom structure. The following slide shows how the 7 classrooms would be constructed across 2 floors. The classrooms will provide the school with the ability to accommodate the new school year group of 120 pupils recently offered places at the school starting this September. The proposal would also enable a full curriculum and lessons to be given to the resulting 3-year groups that would operate across the school in 4 classes per year. Here are some floor plans of the proposed structure. The proposal would measure 51 metres in length and 6 metres in depth with an overall height of 5.6 metres and provide 536 square metres of floor space. The structure would be 2-storey, as I've already explained, purpose-built classrooms with a flat roof. The exterior would feature painted walls and timber cladding and would include UPVC glazing and doorways with suitable and adequate ventilation and heating. Following slide shows a closer image of those elevations for members' benefit of the proposed classrooms. Here are some visuals of the interiors of similar classrooms. The DfE recognises the position the applicant and the council find themselves in with respect to delays in the construction of the new permanent school, partly brought about by the pandemic and economic impacts of the last 2 years, and has agreed to entirely fund the provision of the temporary classrooms. The DfE has implemented similar temporary facilities in other schools across the country, and here are some of those images of other similar classrooms being applied for here. So this slide and the following one shows very similar images to what would exist on the site of the temporary classrooms. And I should add, the applicant has this evening provided CGI visuals of the interior. I've got them. I could show members here tonight, but I can't add them to the presentation that could be more widely seen. So that would be a little messy and they were quite late in the day. I've chosen not to upload them, but you have an idea of what they would look like, certainly from the CGIs in front of you. Turning to the proposed artificial cricket strip, this plan shows the existing layout. And this slide shows the proposed replacement artificial cricket strip situated in the same location between pitches 2 and 3 at the rugby club. The strip would be appropriately constructed and surfaced to ECB standards, and Sport England raised no objections to the proposal subject to the conditions included. And some views of the application site. This is a view of the site from the south. Now, if I can just draw members' attention, so on the northern strip of the site, you can see where the proposed temporary classrooms would be, and on the far right of that image, you can just see, because of the different shade of green, the tied artificial cricket strip between the 2 pitches on the far north, sort of northeast part of the site of the image in front of you. And here's a view of the site viewed from the east. And as I was also pointing out, I think in the previous image, the security fencing along that northern boundary, if I can just jump back a screen actually there. So looking north from the south, the security fencing along the northern boundary would remain at the site, and the proposal would have no harmful impact upon the operation of the rugby club and the pitch used by the club, which would continue to operate outside of the school hours and times as it does at present. There would be no need to alter or amend the manner in which the existing interim school and rugby club operate as a result of this proposal. And to say, the view of the site from the east, this image was when the interim school was under construction prior to it opening in September 2020. And here are some other images of the school sites, the main interim school buildings with the playground in the foreground. View across the main access into the site, and some views of the site generally and where the proposal will be sited. And looking at this image here, yes, well, that's the right one. So you've got the main interim school building in front of you, the store building to the immediate left. It's that area immediately behind that store building where the temporary classroom structure would be sited. And some views of the school looking eastwards, and a view from within the site looking towards the southeast and the rugby club site and the car park, extensive car park beyond. View looking north, showing the access, and north of the site looking eastwards, and you can see the boundary fencing running along the right hand side of the image there. And a view of the site from the north, again looking directly at the area between the fencing and the pitches beyond. And views looking north and of the north looking eastwards across the nearby fields north of the application site. And that's looking northwards up the access road with residential properties, the rears of those properties on Springfield Road on the immediate west. So, as members may recall, the initial permission for the Orsett Heath Academy being temporarily based at the rugby club was granted in February 2019. The school has been operating from there since September 2020. In October of last year, members resolved to, it was last year, yes, it doesn't feel that long ago, does it actually? I checked myself then. In October last year, members resolved to grant permission for the new permanent school nearby. Given the unanticipated delays in the coming forward of the development of the new school, the applicant has been forced to consider accommodating the new incoming year group on the interim site at the rugby club. The proposal is in appropriate development in the Greenbelt, but the applicant has provided very special circumstances that are considered to clearly outweigh the harms to the Greenbelt. Furthermore, the proposal is also sought for a temporary permission period of only 2 years, which would allow for the development of the new school. These are detailed in full in the report, and a table is included on page 71 of your agenda. So to summarise, the proposed school would be an appropriate development in the Greenbelt, but the applicant has demonstrated very special circumstances, clearly outweighing the harms caused. Given the constraints of the site, the provision of the classrooms in this location for a temporary period on the same interim school site is supported by both local and national planning policies with respect to education provision. All other matters associated with landscaping, parking and neighbour amenity impact are considered to be acceptable, and the application is recommended to members favourably on page 77. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Nadia, for that. So detailed reports. And that now opens out to questions. Does anyone have any questions to start? No. Okay. Nadia, just quickly, obviously it's situated on the rugby fields. Is there any sort of long-term benefit for the rugby club? I know obviously these are temporary structures, but I mean, obviously they'll have to come down after a few years, or will they be accessible to rugby club? If they needed them, they may not need them with the temporary building already in place. But is there any sort of benefit to the rugby club, or is it really focused on just school and education?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, this is purely for the school. With respect to the classrooms, it's an urgent need for the school. The temporary classrooms are not to be used by the rugby club. It's for classroom and educational use. Obviously, the club will benefit from the artificial cricket strip, and the club is providing the land upon which the temporary structures are being located. But the application is for the school with respect to the classrooms and the structures.
Okay, thank you. And is there sort of cricket facilities on the site in terms of a cricket pitch? Just have interest with the artificial strip?
Yes, there is an existing. Sorry, shouting a bit there. There is an existing strip. Apologies, I was just pulling back the presentation to view of the site from the south. So keep going up. There, on the far right hand of that image, you can just see the narrow, slightly off green, almost where it says actually, it says Chadwell Library, somewhat randomly, as associated with Google Maps, but that is an existing, but very tired existing artificial strip. And as part of this proposal, the applicant is proposing also to replace and renew that strip to a proper standard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got no further questions, Councillor.
Yeah, just looking at the temporary permission, or the suggested temporary permission over there. There's temporary classroom structures hereby approved shall be removed from the site and the land reinstated according to the written scheme. Is the land going to be reinstated? Looks like it's a build again, but reinstated to the written scheme is a bit vague. I don't know.
If I may, Chair, the area upon which the structures would be sited is a grass landscaped area. There isn't anything else there other than the grass. It's not part of the pitch at all, and that could quite easily be achieved if the structures are removed within that 2-year period, as per condition 1.
Okay, thank you, councillor Little.
Going back to temporary cricket pitch or strip, is that instead of the one they've got, but sited, is it sited in the same place?
Yes, it is.
It's, so will that be coming back up or will that be staying there?
If I may, Chair, the cricket strip is permanent. It's the classrooms that are temporary, and the existing cricket strip would be replaced in the same location by the new artificial strip. On the same, it's the same site and the same size. It's actually like a old-fashioned terms, like a 20-yard cricket strip, but it's actually overall it's 30 metres in length as opposed to 21 metres. So you've got the run up either end, but it's on the same site, same location, and it would replace the tired strip.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on. There is a speaker statement here this evening. This is a statement of support from Steve Monday, and it's the applicants. Steve, if you're with us, if you'd like to come to the front there, you have a mic just in front of you. When you're ready, you've got roughly 3 minutes to present. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It probably goes without saying that I don't say I hoped I wouldn't be sat in front of you just soon after the application in October, but I am delighted to report to you that the school continues to go from strength to strength in its current location. And I'll come on to the reasons for this new application and the context in a moment, but all year groups remain oversubscribed, and that is also true of the year group for September this year, where 120 pupils have accepted places. To provide some brief context to this temporary application before you this evening, we had expected, as you would imagine, work to have started on the main site following the decision in October last year, November last year. That would have, of course, meant sufficient space being available for September 2022 for 3 year groups of 120. Unfortunately, the reason for that delay became clear about 6 weeks ago, indeed after I think Nadia's report was written, that Caledonian, the large multinational construction firm that were the main contractor, went into administration. Now, clearly, that's not something that anyone could have predicted or anticipated, but I am pleased to report that the Department for Education have acted promptly to put in place a Tier 1 contractor who anticipate getting moving very, very quickly. And the crucial bit for me about this application is that the facilities that are being described along with the new classroom will ensure the full curriculum provision available for years 7 to 9 that would be in place for September 2022. And the news of the new contract, the Tier 1 contractor, provides confidence that the 2-year temporary application is precisely that. The proposed building is shielded from view to some extent by the existing buildings. It's a prefabricated building, has been described, involving modest groundworks, less than 50% of the existing building site size in place, so 536 square metres versus 1,140 of the interim building that you've seen just a moment ago. Crucially, it will provide the extra classroom space to manage that final phase of transition from the site as is to the site immediately adjacent with permission. Will be granted shortly. 120 places have been allocated, as I mentioned, for also in September 2022, and this is unquestionably, having looked at all options, the best arrangement possible to one of those places. And reallocation to other school sites, for example, is highly problematic due to the bulge year groups taken by many Thurrock secondary schools in 2019, the current year 9. And of course, most importantly, would be deeply unfair, in my view, to the pupils that have received offers for Orset Heath for September. Given the circumstances described, the Department of Education are fully funding this proposed new temporary building. And to be clear, any lease for this new building will reflect the short-term nature of the application, should permission be granted this evening. The DfE quite rightly consider this an exemplary case of an interim school site arrangement in action, maximising the benefits of a very effective partnership between the school's trust and Thurrock Rugby Club. It has excessive parking spaces for even including this additional provision of 178 spaces on site and a very long access road, meaning that there's no risk from parents or parking on neighbours' drive or similar, which is often a concern, understandably. There have in fact been 0 complaints in the 2 years of operation to date from about parking from neighbours. I'm pleased to report. The addition of this new building, artificial cricket strip, and access to the wider facility will make this interim site infinitely superior to many full-time sites in urban settings, and as evidenced by the 4 very successful DfE inspections since the school formally opened, it really is a first-class interim educational solution made in Thurrock in response to an extraordinary challenge. I clearly hope, as has been mentioned, that you will consider this proposal to meet the very special circumstances threshold. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, any further questions before we head to the balance? Okay, I don't think there are any further hands raised. Would anyone like to start debating this evening? Councillor Howden.
Thank you, Chair. I think the application is largely a slam dunk. If you look at the applicant, this is really how we want educational planning to work in the borough. A homegrown trust, making a joint application hand in hand with and sports groups that are at play in the area. It's precisely how educational planning should work. And that is why when a school doesn't fully exist yet, physically, it is so obviously tried. So yeah, I think this is a perfectly elegant solution that buys us the time that we need for main school to be built out. So I'm very happy to recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? No, okay. I'll cancel. No further comments.
Yes.
I'll go. Yeah.
Just say it's refreshing to see, as we do have an under provision of cricket pitches in the borough, to actually see something that's not mugger. So I welcome that because it is encouraging. We've had quite a bit of success with cricket and there is a resurgence in our young people, and I think we're delivering what is wanted, which we can only hope to.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, there is a recommendation on page 77. That's a recommendation 9.0, which is to approve. Councillor Howden, did you want to recommend approval?
Yeah, happy to, Chair.
Seconded, Councillor Watson. Okay, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Unanimous across the committee. So we can say that all City Academy agenda item is 22/00302/FUL has been approved. Okay, thank you everyone for your contributions, and that then moves us on to the last item on the agenda, which is agenda item 10, because 9 was taken off the agenda. That's land at Fen Lane, agenda item 10, 21/03159/FUL. Lucy, if you'd be so kind as to present a report, thank you.
This application is for full planning permission for installation of renewable energy generating station using ground mounted photovoltaic solar arrays together with associated and other ancillary infrastructure and landscape and biodiversity enhancement. In terms of updates since the report's been published, there have been minor changes to the drafting of conditions 3 and 5. Okay, so we have the site location plan. The application site is located south of Fen Lane and it adjoins the boundary with the adjoining the borough paved road. The site comprises arable field with associated hedgerows. The site is relatively low-lying, flat fenland, although there is a gentle increase in levels to the west, the northwestern part of the site. The land within the site is mainly grade freely moderate soil as was assessed in the applicant's agricultural lands classification. Access to the site is via Leadbridge Road to the south and Fen Lane to the north. There are a number of public rights of way within the site area. The site lies within flood zones 1, 2 and 3. The site is within Greenbelt. There are no statutory ecological designations affecting the site. The proposed route of the Lower Thames crossing would bisect the site. Western side of the site comprises the former South Ockham landfill, and the eastern side of the site is bordered by the Mardyke watercourse. The nearest residential dwelling to the proposed solar array area is Fen Farm Cottages, which is adjacent to the site entrance on Fen Lane. Okay, this is an aerial photograph, and the site is centrally located. Okay, this is the proposed site layout, and the site is within 3 kind of separate parcels which are linked. The gross site area is 86 hectares, and the site area which would have the PV panels on is 65 hectares. And the power output would be 49.9 megawatts of renewable electricity. The slide shows the elevations of the solar panels. The maximum height of the panels is 3 meters and they are fixed. So we've got a couple of photos. So these are photos with what the solar panels would look like in the background. So this is the proposed view facing west from Fen Farm Cottages and footpath 135. And the next one is the proposed view facing south from Fen Farm Cottages and footpath 135. So the panels are in the kind of background, if you can see. Okay, the site is within Greenbelt and would not fall within one of the exceptions to inappropriate development as set out in the NPPF and local policies. Therefore, it would result in inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, which is by definition harmful to openness. The applicant targets circumstances that would amount to very special circumstances that overcome the presumption against this type of proposal. There are 9 factors which were put forward as towards VSCs, and these are assessed from paragraph 6.27 onwards within the planning report. So these are increasing renewable energy generation, the climate emergency, energy security, good design, temporary and reversible impacts, biodiversity net gain, soil regeneration, green infrastructure and farm diversification. The balancing exercise is summarised in paragraph 6.48. It's considered that significant weight should be attached to the benefits of providing renewable energy, including reduction in carbon emissions. The temporary nature of the development attacks some weight, and weight can also be attached to the economic, social and environmental benefits of these proposals. On balance, it's concluded that the benefits of the proposals clearly outweigh the substantial harm to the Greenbelt described. Therefore, a departure from normal Greenbelt policies is justified. The application required an environmental impact assessment with a matter of landscape and visual and cumulative impact scoped in. The landscape and visual impact are assessed within paragraph 6.51 to 6.68 of the planning report. The conclusions are that the landscape quality is relatively low, despite the area being relatively undeveloped. Mitigation measures enhance the ecological value of the site. So the summary is the development is inappropriate within the Greenbelt. The factors put forward towards very special circumstances outweigh the harm of the proposal. There are no objections to the proposals on grounds of amenity, heritage, flood risk or highways with appropriate conditions. So the recommendation is to approve the application for the reasons as set out in paragraphs 7.1 to 7.3 of the report. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Lucy, for that detailed report. Okay, so that opens us up to questions. Councillor Piccolo.
Just some clarification, please. There's a bit of conflict as far as I'm seeing, unless I'm reading it wrong. But under the condition number 3, temporary period of decommissioning, it says, granted for a temporary period of 4 years from the first commercial, no later than 1 week before the first, on the 40th anniversary of the first commercial export of energy, the use shall cease. Prior to the 40th anniversary of the first commercial export of energy, the solar panels and all ancillary equipment and structures shall be decommissioned. So it's saying, sorry, condition and on 6.3A it says the solar farm is proposed for a lifetime of 40 operational years. Past this 40-year period, the generation station would be decommissioned. So they're conflict because it's saying in the condition 3, it's actually saying they've got to start it's got to be decommissioned by the end of the 40th year. But that's not what it says in the preamble. So I think it needs to be looked at. It's obviously set a time period that's got to be decommissioned by after the end of the 40th year.
Yeah, this has been picked up by the agent and they have requested, that was one of the conditions which the wording has been amended. So apologies, but yeah, that's been picked up and it's been, yeah, so it's 40 years and then 6 months. Yeah,
fine.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Little.
So access to this site, it will be totally off the A13. It will be country.
There will be a condition that the lorries will go in and out Midbridge Road, which the over currently use at the moment. Nothing on offence, no. Well, we can't guarantee that vehicles won't travel on the 128 because they might come that way to come up to the A13, but they won't be going along Bennett.
But they won't be going through.
They're accessing the site via Midbridge Road in North Skipper.
Yeah, because I think we've got a 7.
Well, that's the appropriate route to get there. That's the shortest route to get there off the strategic network. But there's nothing saying that they couldn't come down the 127, down the 128, but then they'd have to come up to the A13, down the A13 to Medbridge Road. They're not, condition is that they go in and out by Medbridge Road to the site.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions? No, just briefly, we have had solar farms come through the planning committee in recent years. There's no battery storage facilities for these, no, they feed straight into the grid, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, any further questions? No, okay, right, let's go on to, there is a statement of support here this evening. This is from an Owen Seward, the agent. If you're here, would you like to come up and you've got 3 minutes in which to present your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak in support. My name is Owen Saywood. I am a chartered town planner, landscape architect and chartered environmentalist. I represent the applicant Meadbridge Solar Limited. Just 2 weeks ago, the UK government finished celebrating the delivery of homegrown renewable energy to provide greater energy security and help keep the cost of electricity down in the future. Meadbridge Solar Farm represents an excellent opportunity to deliver on this national priority, as well as on Thurrock Council's commitment to tackle the climate emergency. With a capacity of around 49 megawatts, that's enough clean renewable electricity to power around 13,000 homes. That's every home in South Ockenden and then some. The site is entirely low-grade 3B agricultural land. And crucially, the project will increase biodiversity on and around the site improve landscape features, and increase knowledge of the local archaeology through on-site investigations in due course. The solar farm is a temporary land use for the 40-year duration of the permission, which means that after the solar farm is decommissioned and panels and infrastructure are removed, the site will return to the green belt. Our proposal is only for a solar farm generating clean green electricity to supply the local electricity network. There are no batteries or any other energy storage technologies included in this proposal. Most importantly, I'm delighted that none of the statutory or non-statutory consultees on the application have raised any objection whatsoever to this renewable energy development. The local community have also demonstrated their support for the project. In November last year, we held a public consultation at the Brandon Groves Community Hub. Around 40 residents attended, with 90% expressing support for the proposal, as well as local members. We've listened carefully to community feedback. Many residents had expressed concern about using Fen Lane as a construction route during that community consultation. So the construction route, as you just heard, is now via Meadbridge Road, which is a dedicated haul road located next to the A13 by North Stifford. It's the same access used by Veolia to service the landfill site in South Uffington. While not a material planning consideration for you, we have also committed to make available a community benefit fund of £250,000, and we will continue to work with the local community to ensure that mechanisms are in place for that money to be spent wholly on social and environmental initiatives in the local area when the solar farm is operating. In conclusion, and as your officer has very well demonstrated in the report before you, it is clear that the special circumstances required to allow this development to be sited in the green belt exist in this instance. Also, as your officer has outlined, and national policy supports, the considerable renewable energy and biodiversity benefits associated with the solar farm clearly outweigh any perceived harm in this instance. Very grateful for the time you've given me to talk to this evening. In the interest of climate change, energy security and the UK's green recovery, I urge you to follow your officer's recommendation about to grant planning permission. I am very happy to answer members' questions through you, Chair. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, normally it's not something we do, so thank you for your time there. All right then, was there any further questions to the officers? Councillor Howard?
Yeah, Lee, I know in the past, I know in the past we've had to tidy up local contributions, whatnot, just before local consent is actually issued. The issue of the social benefit fund to support the local community, I take it that is something that officers can review prior to the actual development consent being issued to make sure it meets the general obligations that have been outlined in the applicant statements. So development consent will actually be formally issued by the authority until officers are satisfied that what has been presented is what is being delivered.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely right. And recommendation on page 131 is the application needs to be referred anyway to Secretary of State. So there is a period of time after today in which that could be done as well. So there's that block or two.
Chair, can I just come in on that point? To be clear, on the other solar farms we've had, it's committed to consider recently. So Fen Lane scheme, which was last autumn, and the South Uffington one, which was probably a few years ago now, 2016, something like that. And there's solar farm, a smaller solar farm at East Tilbury, which was even before that. We haven't recommended that the community benefit fund was required as part of the planning recommendation. So the applicant is offering a community benefit fund. As with any planning obligation, especially a financial obligation, it needs to meet certain tests, legal tests, and they're set out, and I've got the MPPF in front of me. So the 3 tests which must all be met are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms related to the development, and fair and reasonable in terms of scale and kind to the development. On the first test, necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, we don't think it is. We think with the mitigation you've got in terms of the conditions, so the construction travel management plan, so make sure that the construction traffic gets a certain route and avoids Fen Lane, landscape and biodiversity enhancements, etc., archaeological investigation, HGV booking, etc. You've got about 13 conditions there. Subject to that mitigation, we think the development washes its face. So in terms of the financial contribution, I think our officer recommendation is fairly clear. We don't think that community benefit fund is required to make the development acceptable in planning terms. Now, if the applicant wants to have a separate arrangement through a non-planning agreement with whatever local forum, that's in their gift to do. But thus far with the solar farms, we haven't insisted on a financial contribution because it doesn't meet that test, the long and short bit. But the applicant can have a discussion with the local forum, but it's not within the planning arena to do that, we don't think.
Yeah, I mean, the point here is that it's not subject to recommendation. The recommendation doesn't say subject to the completion of a planning obligation. It's under section 106 in the normal way it is. So it sits outside of the planning decision. But the point that we're making is that the applicant is clearly putting that forward. So if that is something that we can put forward, we can work with the applicant and the community forum on the content of that. But it isn't bound by the decision in the same way as section 106 would be, because it sits outside of that.
Sorry, yeah, come back in there, Councillor Howard.
Yes, my question was specifically about making sure that we issue development consent after officers are satisfied that what was presented in the applicant's speech was put forward. So if you're saying you can't, if Matt's saying if you can't bind it in that way, I don't want to get into a situation where something's been presented to committee, we expect that to be undertaken before consent is given, and then you turn around and say, well, actually, it didn't really meet it, but it's not really something we can bind on a planning term, because it wasn't actually necessary as an enabling part of the development.
Yep.
That's what I'm just need clarity on.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this isn't your determining factor. So I wouldn't give weight to this. I wouldn't say without this, then the development should be refused. We're saying there's enough in here for the development to be approved. The applicant is saying that there's a community benefit fund that sits outside of that to work with specifically with the community. What we're saying is actually we're happy to work on that, but that sits outside of that planning process. But nonetheless, there is time before a consent would be issued, the decision notice would be issued, in which time we would still be able to have that in conversations. So it should be clear the first time.
If zero progress was made before development consent was issued, you would have the ability to come back and say, I have concerns here.
We would, but I guess the point here is, as Matt's made, it doesn't meet the tests for the obligation. So it's not necessary. It wouldn't prevent the decision from being issued. It is essentially goodwill on behalf of the developers who work with a local community forum. So it is. Yeah, I don't want it to be seen. I don't want it to be seen as though if there was zero progress, that suddenly we should be bringing this back and it should be refused. I just wouldn't. If I was on your side of the table, I wouldn't be giving weight to that in influencing your decision.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Little and Councillor Hall.
Well, as you know, we had the one up at Horsham a few years back, and they actually honoured the amount of money that they gave to the forum, how we spent it, etc. in residents. But the way we just worded it, haven't really got to give us $250,000, even though in fact it is sold to the residents and to us for $1 million. And I would be very disappointed, though it's not a planning criteria, I would be very disappointed if that went, because, you know, we're just giving a big let out. And I do feel very strongly the feedback from that was the one thing actually swayed the residents, etc. So therefore, I think to a certain degree, it would be disgenerous to us to all pass it thinking, haven't got to give them $250,000. You see what I mean? It just doesn't seem fair. And so I don't really know when they'd be getting this question. Or actually be, you see what I mean? Due respects, the presenter tonight could go home and say, well, guess what? You actually got children call. It's it. It's a little bit upsetting.
Yeah, I think there are 2 points, or 2 points I've got in my head anyway. First off, that figure would be the maximum over the lifetime of the development. And it would probably, the way any financial contribution would work through a non-planning agreement, which is what we're saying, is that it would be, there would be a sum of money per megawatt generated per year or something like that. So over the lifetime of the development, and bear in mind it's rated for up to 49.9 megawatts, but depending on conditions it might get, it's like wind turbines, they're rated at certain megawatt, but it depends on wind conditions. So that would be the maximum over the lifetime of the development. That's the first point. The second point, and it's picking up on something Lee said, the test is quite explicit, necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. So turning it round, are you going to refuse the application, or would we have recommended a refusal if the money hadn't been offered? No, we wouldn't. It is acceptable as it stands, which is why you have a recommendation before you. So, and I can clearly understand that an offer of a 6-figure sum of money is obviously an attractive proposition, but it does need to sit outside of the planning consideration, and certainly any planning decision or legal agreement. So it is, I mean, we're happy to advise on the discussions because I think we probably have seen them before. And you've mentioned the, I can't remember, it's Fairwinds, isn't it, solar? So we're probably familiar with how it would work, and it would be, yeah, you might have to constitute a range of
we have the
topics on which it can be spent and who decides how it's spent, and voting arrangements. Yeah, it gets quite technical, so we could probably advise as well. It could be complicated, it could be straightforward. We could advise on that, but what we're saying to you is it's acceptable as it is before you. We're not reliant on financial contribution. If the applicant, as a, I was going to say gentleman's agreement, that's probably the wrong thing to say, the gentleperson's agreement, wants to have that conversation with the local forum, we're happy to participate, but it's outside of the planning remit of this authority.
Matthew, I think it took a lot for Grant to say if all the committee would actually pass it, if it wasn't for the money, because I wouldn't have done, because as I've said before, it's all falls on Finland, which is not just an asset to Ockenden, and also it is a borough-wide asset, and the fans, as they're called, is an asset to us all. You can ride out there, it's good for your mental health, and goodness knows what. But so that being said, if it hadn't been to the street, I would have said probably no. So no, or whatever. But yeah, I would have hoped that we have gentleman's agreement, and it he does. That's on the vote. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think also, Sue, is that first of all, we're not looking at developments in terms of housing here. We're looking at a business that wants to operate for 40 years in Thurrock. So it's obviously a very bad start if they don't all know what they've said here at planning. Usually speaking, it would cause some problems if they didn't follow through with that funding. That's my opinion of the situation. And also, I suppose what's unique about these solar panels is they feed straight into the grid. The ones that store the energy, I think for them there's a bit more profiteering there, respectively, because they're storing the energy to feed it to the grid at certain times. The ones that are feeding it straight into the grid, there's for me, there's just not that much profiteering taking place. So that would be my opinion. It's nice that they're offering 250, and personally, as chair of planning, I'd have full confidence that they would follow through with that, because it is my opinion that they'd have problems if they didn't. Personally, if they're going to operate in Thurrock for the next 40 years. And respectfully, there's nothing we can do. And what we can do, we can go around the committee if it makes you feel more confident and say, if it wasn't for the 250, would you vote in favour of it or not? Me personally, it's nice, it's welcome, it's energy, it's renewable. Let's go for it. The 250 is I think a business wanting to do operation in Thurrock. Personally, I have full confidence. Bottom line is, if you need to take it to the vote, we'll take it to the vote on it. But there's nothing more we can do.
Suggesting it's the 250, but you know, it would be nice. It's feeding into the national grid. Yes, renewable energy, all of it is feeding better. If Thurrock actually got all their electricity bills, when it came into the local borough, that is particularly far. But yes, I think very much we should be aware that even though it's not a material concern of the planning committee, it was really sold to the residents, sold to us, and that is, so I am minded to pass it, but you know, I do. I'm a little bit concerned.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Polly.
Thank you, Chair. With this application, again, we've got the 49.9 kilowatts just on the brink of what is, I just think that we need to be mindful going forward. If we're going to get more applications of this ilk, that we might need to start looking at strategic view of it, rather than as we are doing at the moment, looking at, and as we are required to do, looking at each one on its own merits in isolation. As regards in fact, if anything, I think the 250,000 is perhaps more of a burden, because there are too many unknowns there. We're talking about local forum. I mean, over 40 years, it's £6,000 a year. Is it going to be a lump sum in a trust? Will local members be involved in that? Is it capital projects? Is it like who can apply and not apply? There's too many questions around that at the minute. You know, that's something that needs to be delved into with the community and the elected members, I think, in the great depth. And it's not really a consideration for us here tonight. We've had other situations where people with planning applications have made generous offers, and we've quite clearly said that they're not incentives or sweeteners for this planning committee to be influenced by. And I think we need to be very careful. But the applicant has been open with their consultations with the public. When we've had other applications for the solar farms, we have had letters of objections, we have had representations. With this, there hasn't been, and I think that's accredited to this actual applicant, that they have actually gone out and spoke to the community, and like actually gone out and done their consultation in a well-rounded way, and engaged with the community and helped the community by answering questions as we've had before, like long storage. What's going to happen at the end of the 40 years? How will the solar panels be disposed of, and what type of materials are the solar panels going to be sitting on, and the return of the green belt once the life of the solar farm is finished. So I think in that way, you know, we would encourage other applicants to do the same sort of consultation with the community in the first instance. I think.
Okay, fantastic. All right, then, so I think obviously we've headed into the back stage there. And obviously does anyone else have anything to add before we go any further?
Chair, can I come back on one thing before we go to debate?
Yep, certainly.
So councillor probably made the point about 49, in fact, other members have made recently the point about 49.99 megawatt and that threshold. And it's not just this authority who are getting applications for solar farms at 49.9 megawatts. I've seen some decisions this week in other parts of Essex and further afield. Now, 50 megawatt onshore power, it's a different consenting regime. So an applicant may want to go to the maximum headroom and have a local planning authority decision because it's going to be quicker. Ultimately, it's going to be a lot quicker than going and getting a decision from the Secretary of State and going through a 6-month examination and statutory consultation, front loading and all the rest of it. It takes 2 years start to finish. So that's the reason. What the point I think I'd want to add is in Lucy's presentation, she made the point that there's a Fen Lane solar farm consented, and this sits fairly close by, and then there's an older permission for a South Ockenden solar farm. We were careful about whether or not cumulatively they could be considered as a single development, or because the visual, in terms of visual impact, could you read that from a public footpath? Could you read that as one development? In which case, does it tip over the balance? And should you say it's more than 50 megawatts? It's a different consenting regime. We took legal advice on that, went to council, and it came back quite short and sweet as an answer. No, it's a standalone 49.9. You can't start conflating it. But what and Lucy did say in the introduction, this application is accompanied by an environmental statement. It's EIA development. So what that means is there could be significant impact. And what we did, we screened the topics which could be significant, and that's landscape and visual impacts and cumulative. So what the applicant's submission does is present a statement focusing on landscape and visual in the context of 1, 2, 3 developments fairly close to each other. So it's robust, and in the report the wording's a little bit different for some of the report. It goes on about impact, mitigation, planting, etc., and what the residual impact would be. And on balance, with the mitigation, there's no significant residual impacts. I mean, some members have the benefit of a site visit to Fen Lane back in the autumn, and you would have got a feel for the landscape and how it would sit in the in that context. But we were careful about cumulative impact, bearing in mind stuff which is done around and about. That's the point I wanted to pick up on. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, yeah, thank you, man. And of course, it will come to a point, I think, for councillors and members of the planning committee, probably in the future, where look, we want to play our part in terms of solar farms and renewable energy. We also already did last month with Tilbury Green, and we've got the wind farms in Tilbury Docks. But it would come a point where I think we could realistically turn around to local authority and go, look, we've approved our solar farms. It's now up to you to do your part. So, but I'm not sure we're there yet, but it would get to that point as well. So yeah, I think we've got to a good start, but we all want to be careful. We don't want to be solar farms everywhere. So yeah, we can keep an eye on it through that.
Yeah, just looking at something like me, I know they've asked for the maximum that they can do under the short term or something, 49.9 megawatts. But that lasts for 40 years there, and I know you say it takes longer to apply for the ability to generate more than that. Well, they've got at least 20 years to apply if they wish to, and they could cite this as a reason that we haven't got any objection to a solar farm being there. Is there any way that we could put a condition into it that they can't apply to extend the 49 megawatt limit in the future? Because that's my concern, is that they're talking about it now and you're saying, oh, they're doing it because it's quick, but it still gives them 20 years to actually apply under the other boss and make it bigger and even more intrusive on the area.
So if they did want to take it over the 50 megawatt limit, then they'd have to go through the DCO, the development consent order process, the nationally strategic projects process, which, as Matt said, is kind of 2 years and it's very thorough. So we couldn't stop them doing it, but because they haven't done it now, if they were going to do it, I would have thought they'd do it, if you see what I mean.
I can understand what you're saying, but they may want to just get it on board, and as I say, it gives them the opportunity to get the principle of us as a local council accepting it going on there, which means they could have asked for an increase in the future. Whilst it may not hold up a great deal of weight legally, I just felt that if it was part of a condition, well, they couldn't apply to increase it above the 49 megawatts. If they did apply in the future to the government, at least we would have on record that at the time of the approval, it was approved on the basis that it wouldn't get any bigger. So yes, it may not have a loss, but at least, you know, they could do it in 10 years' time, and we might not be, you know, the councillors there, it may not be there or whatever. And I'm just saying it just make sure that if it does go to the government, they are aware of what our concerns were at the time about it getting bigger.
I think the comfort I can probably give you is we've had an application submitted with a description of development, and there's a red line plan and there's a plan showing the layout of the solar arrays. If you were to agree the recommendations, there's a condition to say it will be implemented in conformance with that. If the applicant then, let's say, further down the track, got an option on another 2 fields and they wanted to up the capacity, it's a new planning application. And then we'd be having a discussion, scratching our heads and thinking, well, actually 49.9 plus another 2 fields, does it mean 50? So cumulatively, does it go over the threshold? That's the comfort. I do understand your point, because the point you've raised before. So we're assessing what's in front of us. I suppose the comfort is if the applicant wants another bite of the cherry, and you know, if they get a land option or whatever further down the track and they want to extend it, it's a new, you know, we'll restart the clock, it's a new planning submission. And then it's the additional red line and how it relates to the current red line, and does it tip it over? Should we consider I haven't got an answer to that, because it's pretty one for lawyers. Okay. But it's a separate planning event. It's a new planning application.
Okay, all right then. Okay then, so as mentioned, we've headed into the debate phase. It's 23 minutes past. Obviously, I'll say the next few minutes ago, we might have to extend standing orders, but it depends unless if no one else has anything to say, we'll head to the vote. Okay, excellent. All right then. So yeah, good news. I'm really confident that this is certainly the right way to go about things. Certainly with solar renewable energies, the agents of sort of works hard with the local community. I'm very confident that 250 will be handed over in time, and I'm sure we'll get more details of that in the coming months. So with that, there's a recommendation there. 8.0 on page 131. I'll recommend approval. Is that seconded? Councillor Howden. Okay, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, that's 8, and that's unanimous across the committee. Okay, so we can say that agenda item 10, 21/02159/FUL has been approved. That's now the end of the meeting. It's 24 minutes past 8. Thank you everyone for this year. Thank you officers for all your hard work. Thank you for everyone attending here this evening. Best of luck in a couple of weeks' time, and we will be back on planning on June the 9th. Thank you very much. Yes.